Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through 20 plus new fantasy releases from this year. I've done this same style video earlier in the year, so if after hearing about these 20 plus books you're looking for an additional 20, I'll have that video linked. I do have a few manga on this list, and I primarily talk about manga over on my side channel, but I wanted to highlight a couple of new releases because I know that some of you are interested in both novels and in manga. And then on top of all of that, I have done in-depth videos for every single one of the books on this list. So if you are looking to hear more in-depth thoughts, I'll have all of those linked, and I'll have purchase links as well, so that hopefully this can serve as an overview and a recap for a lot of various different books, and it can be a nice place to reference back to if you are interested. You've got all the links here. At the very end of the video, I'm going to assign some, you can call them awards, some of the standout books. Some of the standouts are for really good reasons or just in general have to do with hype, those sorts of things. But jumping into it, I'm going to start with the manga. If you're not into manga, you can go ahead and skip ahead. But the first one I'll mention would be Hat Atelier. The 11th volume has come out very recently, and I think it continues to show how astounding the artwork is. It continues to have interesting commentary on society. The story follows a young girl who is trying to learn more about magic to not only help somebody in her personal life, but to try and find a way to make magic help society, to try and make it so that people's lives can be improved upon through what she might be capable of and what other witches are capable of as well. And the magic is truly wondrous in this story. It's so whimsical. It's fantastic. If you have ever been hesitant to try a manga, this one might be a good place to start, just purely in that the art is astoundingly beautiful, but also once you get further into the story, it starts to really hit some deeper themes. It's exceptional. Can't recommend it enough. After that, we have Yona of the Dawn. This is a very long series, so we're pretty far into it. The newest volume to me left off in kind of a funny place. It's kind of in the middle of a specific arc. However, the story starts out as a young girl who is very pampered, and she is very oblivious and unaware of what's going on within her own kingdom. Her father is the ruler. However, at the very beginning, something happens. Yona has to go on the run with her bodyguard, and she is trying to reclaim her throne through the use of some dragon beings. And then as you progress, the story combines some romantic subplots, some friendship, and also a lot of military and political happenings as well, and you'll actually see some full-on battles that are pretty fun to explore, and the series is quite funny. It's quite campy. I wouldn't say it hits on the serious tones like Hat Atelier does, but if you're looking for just a fun, good time, I think Yona of the Dawn serves to do that quite well. Next, we have Spy Family Volume 10. I think that this is the hardest hitting of all of them, which isn't that hard to do because a lot of Spy Family is so over the top and ridiculous, but I still want to note that it is in part because of how silly the rest of it is that it really stood out to me when it finally hit those heavier notes. And the commentary on war and atrocities and violence was really well done in this newest volume, while still maintaining its ridiculous campy nature. If you don't know, this follows a family that has come together to try and accomplish various different goals. One of them is a spy, one of them is an assassin, and one of them is a telepath. And the assassin and the spy do not know that the other has that as a profession, but their adopted daughter is a telepath and knows this about her parents. They don't know it about each other, and they don't know she can read minds. And it's very, very silly, and it's so fun, and it's so campy, and it is just the best thing to pick up when you need to be put in a good mood. It's so much fun, but this newest volume really was quite devastating at the beginning. Still ended up having some silly moments too. After that, we have Girl from the Other Side. Technically, the story has been completed for a bit, but the deluxe edition of the 4th installment came out, and it was, in my opinion, a masterful ending. The story is very dark, and it feels like a grim fairy tale. It's confusing, it's a little convoluted, but it's also incredibly wholesome and sweet and heartbreaking at the same time. You follow a man referred to as Teacher, who is kind of this monstrous being who is the guardian to this little girl, and he cares so much about her. You see how much she just craves to have some affection, but due to the curse that is on this being, he cannot touch her, and no other being on the other side can touch her, or she will gain this curse as well. And her, thus far, not having this curse has attracted the attention of human beings who do not live on the other side and who want to try and use her to maybe make some kind of cure for the curse. But it obviously puts her in danger, and there is a danger of disrupting her relationship with her teacher, father-like figure. And all you want is for them to live a happy, cozy life. And you're like, I don't want anybody to get in the way of that, but it wouldn't be a story if things didn't have something come up. It's wonderful. It's dark, it's sinister, it's sweet. It's such a weird contradiction of things, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. So a lot of the mangas really delivered. If you like manga, I think a lot of these, there's definitely some good ones to pick from this list. Now getting into the novels, we'll go ahead and start with Sanderson's secret projects. So we have Yumi and the Nightmare Painter and Sunlit Man. Yumi and the Nightmare Painter follows two main perspectives, and one of them is a young man living in this rather futuristic society. It somewhat resembles modern Tokyo, and he ends up finding himself, or a version of himself, transported to Yumi's land. Yumi being the other main character, she is this revered individual who uses her capabilities to draw in spirits and request things on behalf of the people from those spirits. It seems like there's some parallels between their magic, however their worlds are drastically different and they don't understand how their souls, their bodies, it's kind of unclear as to what's even going on, how those things are in each other's worlds and why. And as you explore the story, you start to see the way that what starts as them being very frustrated with each other and bickering a lot, how they start to understand each other, push each other, grow together, and grow to care for one another while still trying to solve this strange mystery. I really, really adored Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. I can't say the same thing, sadly, for the Sunlit Man, although I think there are still going to be a lot of people who really enjoy Sunlit Man. So this one follows an unnamed character, we'll say, or at least they're unnamed for quite a while, and it would seem they are a person from Sanderson's Cosmere books, and they are finding themselves on the run. They end up on this planet that has very extreme circumstances. Everybody is fighting to survive every single day. It seems more futuristic, it seems very sci-fi leaning, and very, very dangerous. And this man is trying to find a way to get off this planet, and he also is trying very hard to not care at all about what the people of this planet are facing, but he does kind of inevitably get pulled in to their situation. The reason that this one didn't really work for me is because I do think it's so incredibly tied to other things in the Cosmere and things that we've yet to really see, that for me it felt like reading a sequel that I didn't have the other books for yet. But I don't think that's going to be the case for everybody. I think a lot of people are still going to really enjoy the world and the story for what it was, and they're going to like the subtle nods to, and you could almost say foreshadowing to, events that we're eventually going to see in other Cosmere works. After that, we have Threads of Power. This is a continuation from the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, and we follow a lot of our original cast of characters as well as some new characters. There is a mysterious object that seems like it is going to disrupt not only their world and the magic, but it also might affect other worlds as well. A lot of you know that Shades of Magic follows characters who have the ability to travel between parallel worlds, and the balance of magic is not there. It is very imbalanced between these worlds. Red London, which is where our main character is from, is the one that has utilized magic and has a good amount of it to where it is the most in check. And then other ones either don't have it at all or have an abundance of it to a point of danger. And so Red London has always kind of profited, but the other Londons and people from them, they want the balance that Red London has. And there are also beings within Red London that want to disrupt the political sphere, the political realm, you could say, which does impact some of our characters. And then some new, you could almost say new magic is introduced in Threads of Power. And what's exciting is that as the series continues, I think we're going to finally start to see not only answers for this installment, but for the original trilogy as well, to some of the things left unanswered. So that's very exciting. It starts really slow. It kind of has to establish itself as a new story while still pulling you into it from the previous book, so it almost feels like middle book syndrome despite being the first in a new series, but I quite liked it. I do think though it might end up being a mixed, people might have mixed feelings about this one. After that we have Bonesmith by Nikki Palpretto. This follows a young girl who has dreams of being a Valkyrie, which is this warrior-like person within her particular house. And so there's various different houses that have different powers, and hers has to do with bone magic. There are beings that are more so rooted in the magic. There are the people that have magical abilities but are more focused on being warriors, and then you have people that are more like craftsmen and forgers, and all of them have magical abilities, but their focus is different. And so Ren, our main character, is this warrior-like person. She cannot wait to finally be a Valkyrie, an established Valkyrie, but then something goes wrong at the beginning of the story and she finds herself in some really boring outpost. But it turns out to not be quite as boring as she expected when she ends up going on a rescue mission, and her only ally in this rescue mission is a person that might have been responsible or partially responsible for the kidnapping of the person that Ren is trying to rescue. So it's kind of enemies to allies, and there's a lot of secrets that are revealed along the way, and the bone magic and the way the magic works in the story in general I thought was really cool. Definitely a great book for the fall season. After that we have Immortal Longings. I have consistently described this one as feeling like cyberpunk anime. It's really over the top, it's very cool, it has lots of like awesome vibes, and we're following a society where you have the rich and you have the poor. There's really nobody in between. The ruling class is made up of a very small percentage of people, and our main character is looking to topple this and make it all crumble, and so that everybody can start fresh. However, her means of doing this revolves around her entering this tournament and trying to win so that she can get some form of contact between herself and the ruler and try to assassinate him during this time. The tournament is very dangerous, it's very cutthroat, and a lot of people have something called a jumping gene, which allows them to transfer their soul, their chi, into another body, and that makes it all the more difficult to actually defeat your opponents. From there, we have House of Roots and Ruin. This one is interesting in that it's somewhat of a sequel and somewhat of a place you can start with this world. The first one was a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and it was kind of a dark retelling. And in this new one, we are less so, I think, leaning into things that are really scary and really creepy in an obvious way, and it's more so like when you really sit back and think what's being done, it is really disturbing. So I'd say it's more disturbing than scary. And you follow a girl who was very, very small in the other book, and now she is much older. She's on the cusp of adulthood, and she is trying to establish herself within the world. However, it seems that she has some kind of connection to ghosts, and so her siblings don't really want her going out into the rest of the world because they don't want to bring upon them all of these rumors. They don't want her life to be ruined. So she's trying to discern all the time what's going on around her that's real and who is appearing to her that's not really there. And she's also trying to decipher some strange occurrences that are going on in this place that she has gone to. This particular place she is residing in because she is trying to do someone's portrait. And she's a very talented artist, but there are some very strange things happening, and she doesn't know how to tell what's real and what's not. From there, we have The Sword Defiant. This is a story about what happens after our heroes save the world. And not just after when it comes to the world itself, but what happens to the heroes. And how does PTSD and trauma and the weight of their reputations start to really pull them down. And it is kind of, in a lot of ways, your cliche fantasy with the character types and the sorts of heroes that you see, but then it's almost dismantling what we've come to recognize as standard in fantasy. I really enjoyed the examination of trauma and how it can weigh a person down, and how when you don't have anybody seeing you as anything but perfect, it really makes you feel very isolated. You should have everything, you have everyone's respect, and yet for some reason you're just so unhappy. So I think it handled those themes very, very well. I do think that it's very slow, however. It's not maybe as action-packed as the cover would make you believe, or as the synopsis would make you believe. In some ways, I think at first glance, it sounds like it's going to be like Kings of the Wild, which is known for being campy and fun, and this one was not either of those things. It was quite serious. From there, we have Nightbirds. The story follows a few different young women who have the ability to pass on magic through touch. And so they are used within these various different houses. The wealthy kind of have people pay to get the magic from these girls. And in some ways, there's a lot of questions as to how much freedom these girls have. They have a lot of privileges and a lot of luxury that comes with this life. However, it comes at the cost of them giving away a part of themselves. And then on top of all of that, you're starting to see some religious figures ask whether or not this is sinful behavior, if we're calling upon darker forces, should young women with these powers even be allowed to exist? And so you're seeing our characters, their eyes are being opened to the poverty that exists for a lot of people, the lack of luxury that a lot of people have, and then also within their own lives, the lack of freedom that maybe they have, but what they can do with their own privileges. I thought it was pretty cool and interesting and different, and I definitely thought the characters all had very, very distinct personalities, and they challenged each other quite often. From there, we have The Weaver and the Witch Queen. This is historical fantasy, and the other story by this author is rooted in Norse mythology. This one feels very much like it's rooted in Norse sagas. And so it's going to feel very Viking-esque, but what if the magic in all those stories was real? What would that look like? And you follow a young woman who her sister has been taken, and the other women that are friends are trying to find a way to rescue the person who has been taken. From there, we have Chaos and Flame. This one is kind of enemies to allies to the extreme, where you find that these two individuals, their houses are at war with each other, and one of them ends up recognizing the other because their brother has these prophecies and he's been drawing this girl for forever. And so when our main character sees her, despite being on the opposite side, despite them fighting each other, he decides instead of killing her that he will capture her and bring her to his brother because she seems to be a key in whatever is going on in their war. From there, you're kind of seeing these two characters have this attraction toward each other. For me, I think if you like a lot of angst, then you will like this, but if you find that the angst sometimes feels odd when it comes to the amount of actual enemies that they are initially, then maybe it won't work. But I know for some people, they love an angst-filled story. They love the enemies to allies, enemies to lovers. So if that's you, then this one will probably really work. From there, we have Thornhedge. This is sort of a dark fairy tale retelling, and it kind of asks the question of, if there is a beautiful young woman trapped in a tower, is there actually a legitimate reason why she's been locked up? And so you are following this little individual who is the person responsible for trying to keep everybody else away from the tower where there is a young woman who's locked up. You don't really know why the young woman's locked up. You don't really know why this person wants to keep it that way and why she wants to keep everybody else away, but you're discovering that throughout the story. For me, I thought thematically, there was a lot of commentary on the way people will hold responsible the actions of others and they will decide it's their fault. And in actuality, we have to learn to give ourselves grace and forgiveness and not hold ourselves responsible for the actions of others. However, you can just very easily read it as a dark fairy tale. It doesn't have to be anything more. I think that's definitely my interpretation. After that, we have Divine Rivals. I probably don't need to say a whole lot about this one because a lot of you know very much about it, but you follow a young woman who wants to use her skills in journalism to report accurately what is happening on the front lines of a war that is driven by a lot of anger from the gods. And so she, in trying to do this reporting, is finding herself within a lot of dangerous situations. She's seeing a lot of tragedy. And in all of this, she is also finding these little moments of joy and happiness through her friends, through another journalist that is there alongside her. It's very hard hitting. It was absolutely fantastically done. It's a very different setting than I'm accustomed to in fantasy. And I think that it's very unique and it's definitely very well receiving of hype, I would say. After that, we have Combat Codes. This follows a young boy who is forced into some fighting pits and he cannot quite remember how he got here, but he has these memories, these flashbacks that come to him a lot. He is trying to do what he can to survive. He's trying to do what he can not to anger the people that are above him, and he's trying to also support the other young boys who are in the fighting pits. His fighting prowess attracts the attention of a warrior who decides that they're going to do what they can to pull this young boy named Seago out of the situation and hopefully try to put his strength to good use. After that, we have Foxglove. This is also a sequel. It's a sequel to Belladonna. And you actually no longer just focus on the main character from the first book, but you're starting to have another character come into the picture as a perspective. And you are seeing that death personified is not the only being personified. You're also starting to see somebody who has a lot of control over fate, and how that individual and death start to clash, and the way that our young women protagonists are kind of caught within that. They're trying to do what they can to make sure that a lot of people are not harmed by the actions of these beings, while also maybe sometimes seeing the humanity in them as well. Then we have The Thorns Remain. This is a story that on surface level sounds like something a lot of us have heard before. We have a character who, she is out in the woods with her friends, the Fae show up, her friends disappear, and now she's trying to find a way to get her friends back. The Fae have convinced everybody in this small village that all of these young people left months ago. There's nothing strange going on, and so she's kind of very alone and trying to get her friends back. This one feels very historical fantasy, and I'll add that it, I think, is very, very, very slow moving. However, I do think that the themes and the story are executed exceptionally, and while on surface level it sounds familiar, I do think that what it does with a familiar story is quite unique. After that, we have The Salt Grows Heavy. This is more horror leaning, and it is basically a Little Mermaid retelling, but what if the Little Mermaid pretty much ate everybody who brought her onto land? And she allies herself with a witch doctor, and they find this strange cult, basically, that is using children to further some odd things, and they get involved. That's kind of the setup. It's very, very, very short. The writing is incredibly dense, but there's a lot of commentary on how fairy tales are not really what we have thought of them before. From there, we have Last Heir to Blackwood Library. This follows a young woman who finds out that she's the last remaining heir to this abbey, and if she wants, she can live there. And there's a library within this abbey that it seems other people are very, very interested in. It also seems like there's some mysterious, almost hauntings going on in this place, or there's at the very least some strange power remaining in this place. And she is starting to become more and more unreliable as you read the story, because she doesn't really understand what's going on, and people are telling her, hey, you said that before, or we've had this conversation, and she doesn't remember. So it seems like there's gaps in her memories, and it's very hard to know if what she is saying and thinking and feeling is accurate or not. And if you like that mystery in your story and you like that confusion and trying to piece everything together, then this definitely will be a very interesting reading experience for you. Last, we have Untethered Sky. And this is another novella. It is very, very short, as novellas are, and you're following this young girl who, when she was very young, this monster basically harmed some people she cared about, and she now wants to become somebody who can work alongside these massive hawks, basically called rocks, I believe they're called, and she wants to hunt alongside them to try and defeat these monsters who wreak havoc on a lot of people's lives. So you're just kind of following her in pursuit of this, trying to have this bond with this animal, and the way in which they are used. When I say they, I mean the other hunters like her. They're used by sometimes people for good reason, but also for political reasons, and the way their reputations are utilized, and the way that the truth can be twisted to serve certain narratives. I quite liked it. I thought it was very cinematic. I understand that it's because it's so short, it might not be quite a satisfying story for a lot of people, but I quite liked it. Getting into the little awards that I mentioned I'd be doing here at the end. So first up, we have Best Sequel, because a fair amount of these on the list were sequels. I'm gonna have to give this to Spy Family Volume 10. I think this is the best volume of the series thus far, and for that reason, I'm like, it's not just that it was a good sequel, it's that it's the best. It had the best moment in the story for me. So I think that this one was the clear winner. After that, we have Most Underhyped, and I think for me, The Thorns Remain. This one is probably the most underhyped and underrated because the rating is quite low. So low that I think it would deter a lot of people if you are somebody who sees a low average rating and you're like, no, never mind. I do think that it is very meaningful, very impactful. It is definitely very slow, very slice of life in a lot of ways, but I still thought the themes, the way they were executed was great. I actually have another prompt about the ones with the most well done themes. So I could have said that Thorns Remain. There's a number of these that I think have really well done themes. I think the Sword Defiant did. I think a lot of them did, but the one that I think stands out the most to me is Girl from the Other Side. The themes are ambiguous and up for interpretation. To me, they were exceptional though, and I just thought it was a fantastic story. Weird, and I don't think everybody's going to agree on the ending because it's ambiguous, but I thought it was fantastic. And then the rest of these are not manga. So for most unpopular opinion, I have to say Sunlit Man. I say this not really letting myself look at other people's opinions thus far. It's just, for me, this was my least favorite thing in the Cosmere that I've picked up. So I feel like on that level, it's probably a very unpopular opinion, but didn't really care for this one, sadly. But you know, the Cosmere's huge, so something is bound to be a least favorite. After that, what I'm calling bandwagon passenger. So what's something that I'm definitely on the bandwagon for, and that would be Divine Rivals. I saw all the hype before I picked it up. I saw that this one was everywhere. It seemed like everybody was loving it. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. The writing's so lush and beautiful, and it's so devastating and heartbreaking, and I just can't get enough. And I was like, we'll see. And I picked it up and I was like, yeah, I think so too. So Divine Rivals definitely not just met the hype, it exceeded the hype for me, and I am so excited for the sequel. Most hyped, obviously, I could have said the same thing, but I'm not letting myself double dip. I have to have different answers. So I guess very obviously, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter and Threads of Power. I mean, they're powerhouse authors, right? You know, you got V.E. Schwab and Brandon Sanderson, so what do you know? They ended up being, out of all the books on this list, I would say those are probably the most hyped. And then that's it for the little awards there at the end. I'm very curious if you've read these, which ones would you put in these categories? And then also, it doesn't have to be any of the ones I've listed, just for those little categories at the end, which one would you assign to what? And also, if you are interested, like I said before, in other new releases, I'll have the one I did previously as a recap in the description bar, and I'll have a bunch of new releases wrap-ups and discussion videos in case you'd like more in-depth thoughts. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. That was a lot of stuff to get through, but hopefully this was very helpful and gave you a better idea of some of these, or maybe it opened your eyes and put certain books on your radar you hadn't seen before. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day though, and I'll see you later. Bye.